listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God, boy.
Welcome to the House by the Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William. Join me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Deliverance, the 1972 classic that stars the now late Burt Reynolds, as well as John Voight and Ned Beatty and Ronnie Cox, who is in RoboCop, is Dick Jones.
yeah.
Completely different type of role here. But yeah, because this is just a movie that we had discussed covering before, and then with Burt Reynolds passing, it seemed like a time to kind of look back at what he had said was one of his best movies. And
I was thinking about watching some of his other movies, but it's like, man, him and Mark Wahlberg both don't like that they did Boogie Nights. And that film is so good, and I think Burt Reynolds also hates Smoking the Bandit too, which obviously not as good as the first one, but I did watch Smoking the Bandit as well.
He's just on Amazon right now, isn't it?
Because on Deliverance, I'd rented on Amazon at the end. It's like, coming up next, Smoking the Bandit.
Same movie,
Autoplay.
It's a sequel.
Same exact movie.
It's like, the Bandit is just the character from Deliverance a few years later. But yeah, so before we get into discussing Deliverance, we'll go through some things we've been watching, because there hasn't been a ton of news lately. The new Halloween is drawing closer and closer, be coming out,
and people seem to like it.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think.
Like a lot of people have seen that movie now. And two, we're recording this on what date? Like the 15th,
September 16th.
Yeah.
So this is episode 2. We're recording another episode before this
on The Predator, which you probably already listened to. But
because they did the premiere at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, and it's gotten good reaction.
MJ Jones, one of our listeners, viewers, he said he was supposed to go see it. I don't know if hopefully he'll comment and say how he liked it. But it's like when you follow certain people on Twitter, or like a group of people, which there's a lot of film journalists and horror fans and stuff. It's like everybody talks about these movies, and it's like it seems like everybody in the world has seen the movie at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm super now that it's came out and people are like, okay, yeah, it's legit. Now I'm like super excited for it, and I'm ready for that type of movie.
Yeah. So since the recording schedule, I can't really cover too much more news, but I guess we can just jump into the things we've been watching. And so I watched a couple of movies that were kind of throwbacks, that were indie movies that there's been a lot of discussion about. So like The Barn. So disclosure on that, the director Justin Seaman worked on Volumes of Blood Horror Stories on a segment that Sean directed a segment for. I don't know if I ever actually met him, but there is like some connection there. But The Barn was something I had heard a lot about and seen things about, because it seemed to be one of those kind of independent movies that got a lot of buzz and people discussing it, because it had like the cool characters in it. It had like a pumpkin character and a scarecrow and a miner. And it's basically just, there's this barn that if you go and you knock on the door, it brings demons out. If you go there on Halloween night, there's characters that are going to a concert, and they stop at the barn along the way and knock on the door, and then it brings the demons out. So, pretty standard concept. And it was kind of shot in kind of like a throwback to the 80s way. And the acting and a lot of the decisions in it kind of feel like a throwback to the 80s. So from that perspective, it's good. And, it does kind of feel like the era and things like that. You can definitely tell. So when you talk about indie movies, we're not talking about It Follows. We're not talking about Mandy or, Drive, or all these different movies that you would say are independent. Even though they have $1 million budgets, they're just produced independently of a studio and then distributed by someone. This is micro budget, so I'm not sure what their budget was, but under, I'm assuming $50,000, probably more like 10 or something like that. So when you're dealing with a movie of that budget level, I think, like with Volumes of Blood or anything, I think it takes a certain tolerance for things, for people to watch those from beginning to end to enjoy them. Just because you're not seeing the sweeping, Stranger Things, crane camera movements, and seeing the wide shots of the towns that are fully furnished with 1980s cars and wardrobe and everything. It's more tighter shots, indoor locations or outdoor locations. It's like in the woods or in a cornfield or outside. or like a small concert venue where there's not a ton of people.
Cornfield, 1955. Any cornfield can be any year, as long as after the invention of corn.
So you have
1782.
so you have those elements that are kind of, establish it. So because like some of the reviews, I think what happens is people hear a buzz about indie film, because what happens is different websites will discuss it, and like, because those websites like Bloody Disgusting or Dread Central or all these sites, they're more accustomed to watching low budget movies, because that's what a lot of horror comes to their doors, is low budget horror. So they have a tolerance for it, and they can look past that and enjoy the movies for what they are. The average person then hears the buzz from one of these sites and they check it out and they're like, wait a minute, this doesn't look like the indie film. This isn't Blumhouse. This isn't.
Yeah.
But Blumhouse's are their original movies are $5 million budgets or less, and sequels are like 10 or something. So it's not
this
that.
was better than The Conjuring.
So then people watch these movies and then give it, they'll give a 1 out of 10 because like, oh, nothing was believable, blah blah blah, and that happens a lot. So this is, if you're into independent movies from that era, the movie does pull that era off and has a cool concept. That being said, it didn't really keep my attention. I was watching this late one night after I'd done some other stuff, because it was on the streaming service Tubi TV to stream for free.
And one more time, what movie was this again?
The Barn.
The Barn. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I watched it on that Tubi TV service, and I actually did fall asleep towards the end of it, but I was also just really tired, and I rewatched the end of it. So, cool concept and setup. The execution, it was like a developing filmmaker, because I think because that was before his Volumes of Blood and 1031 sequence, the director, Justin Seaman. And I thought that those were more like visually interesting, the segments he did in those, than this one. So if you're like a fan of low budget horror, it did have a little bit of TNA, and it had some gore and stuff. So a throwback to the era, but nothing explicit or nothing like the kills weren't Saw level or Terrifier level, which is the other independent movie I watched recently. So The Barn is, if you're into low budget horror movies that are throwbacks to the 80s, which is what pretty much all of them are now, is throwback movies. But this one was kind of from a couple years ago, so a little bit before all of it became the huge deal that it is now. Like the character designs are cool and things like that, but like the characters, there's no real big character moments or anything. Like one of the characters, his big thing is obeying the rules of Halloween, which kind of change and shift throughout the movie a little bit. And stereotypical type of those characters is just like it was if you're into low budget movies and you want the 80s aesthetic, I think it delivers parts of that. I feel like a bigger budget and more time could have given a better product that delivered on the promise.
It's like anything. It's like a lot of these, directors are hamstrung and like doing good just to make something that's 90 minutes long.
Yeah. So in the music, it was cool because I think wasn't that one where Rocky Gray did the music for it before he did some of the other stuff? So I think, and he was the drummer from the band Evanescence back when they were big. So
he's the one that also composed my.
The music for your Volumes of Blood segment. Yeah.
No. Sorry, he didn't do mine.
And Daredevil.
Oh my gosh, why am I skipping his name?
Oh no.
I was just thinking about him the other day. Not Rocky Gray. Sorry, I was thinking about Rocky Gray because
he did it for some of the other ones.
Yes,
forgetting who did.
And now
yours.
I'm like ashamed because Rocky Gray's name got stuck in my head.
Yeah, because I just remember he directed a sequence in that other.
So Rocky Gray produced 1031, and then he did a sequence in that as well. So that was like his first foray, which is another horror anthology. His first foray in directing. A lot of these films, I mean, sometimes the reason I like watching them is just like, okay, what are people doing?
Shane Prather.
Yeah, Shane Prather. Sorry, Shane.
Yeah, so Shane Prather was he had done music for Sharknado 3.
Yes.
And Jurassic Galaxy and Alien Predator and Megalodon and Triassic World. And so he's composer on a lot of these different movies. Tomb Invader, Shark Attack. So Psycho Brother-in-Law. So
He's done some game stuff, to video game stuff, I think.
yeah, so pretty
he's put in some
prolific.
work.
Oh, Resident Evil 7, he did some work.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So, you know, you have a connection to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Shane Prather's only did the music for your segment. Rocky Gray did music for some of the other ones. But just the barn is something that, based on the artwork and the promotional materials and a lot of the images I saw, I didn't quite live up to that. Just because it was low budget.
It's a throwback to the 80s when you see the box art.
Yeah, when you see...
It's very easy. It's much easier. As an artist, it's not easy, to create art, but I'm saying it's easier to focus on a single image to create mood, tone, and visuals versus carrying that through 90 minutes of moving images.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where if you're into low budget movies, I watched it on Tubi TV. They have an app that works with the Chromecast. You can watch it on your TV, so you can check that out. I don't think that it was a transcendent movie from that genre, just like an effectively done one, because honestly, making a low budget to no budget movie that throughout it has, adequate visuals and sound and is watchable, that's an achievement when you're dealing with no budget, because that's hard to do. We see a lot of them where they don't pull it off. And I didn't really see anything that looked like huge, jumping the 180 line, just where, when dialogue cut between characters doesn't make any sense where they're positioned or how it's cut. I didn't see anything like that. So it all looked really good and things like that. It's just, I think that a bigger budget would have allowed them to pull off the look and feel more, and not feel kind of small and contained. But, it's definitely fit into that era. And if you'd given it a little bit more budget, you could have definitely released it. If you'd given it a little bit more budget, shot it on film, you could release it in the 80s and it would fit right in. But then the other one, Terrifier. So, Derek, you watched that as well, right?
Yeah, it's fucking garbage.
That's
What
on
made
Netflix
you watch
now.
it? Did you just see it on there?
It was on the list, and I hurt my back this week, so I didn't really have much to do. So I was like, okay, I'll watch this. Need to watch some horror movies.
So you're just like, power on Netflix.
Yeah,
Go.
And I watched it, and it's like, and I had seen some of the other stuff that before I'd watched it. I had seen some of the highlights on. So I saw one of the kill scenes on Netflix
Art the Clown.
or on Instagram. So like, okay, I'll watch it. God, it's bad. Like, I really hate movies like this, and to me, it's like.
Like what though? Explain it to me, because all I know is that clown.
So it's...
I mean, it's just essentially it's like some dumbass clown that goes and murders people, and they make really dumb decisions. And there's like two girls like flirt with him in a pizza parlor, and it's like this demonic clown ripoff from American Horror Story. What's the show?
So the clown
it's
had
very
existed
I know, but
before-
it's very reminiscent to the way that it looks.
Because, the Art the Clown had existed, I think, so there was a horror anthology, All Hallows Eve, or like a short film that they had from years ago that the clown was in, and then they made this feature. So so it's kind of an 80s, it's not really like the slashers like Friday the 13th or anything like that. I've heard people compare it to like the original Maniac, I think, or because it's essentially just this Art the Clown stalks and kills two girls and anyone else that he encounters, or he stalks and kills people in the pursuit of these two girls throughout this movie. And it's kind of a throwback in that the character has no real dialogue or motivation. There's not multiple locations. It mostly takes place in kind of one place.
It takes place in what makes no sense is like they go to like an apartment complex or something that is being they got exterminated and they're getting rid of bugs or something. So they go in there and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, go to the bathroom." It's like, no, that's not how this works. There is no way in the world will you allow two random people to go into a building. Or
because the one girl stayed in the car.
Yeah, okay, but in no real world situation would you allow somebody to come into a building that you're working. Like, that just wouldn't happen.
Well, and two, so like people...
And then there's like a crazy woman in the apartment complex that has a baby doll that's running around, and it's like, what the hell is going on here?
Or like a warehouse type deal.
I don't know. Yeah, it made no sense.
I think it was like a warehouse.
Is a warehouse
kind of.
somebody that changes into a house at night?
No. What was it? There's a cartoon called Turbo Teen where a teenager turned into a car from the 80s.
Yeah. See, I'd much rather watch that. And then there was I'm not going to get too much into it, but
we don't give any big spoilers.
But there's a hacksaw scene, and look, in my line of work, I had to use a hacksaw, and if I could ever have one as good as that they use in that movie, I would purchase it, because in real life, you use a hacksaw and use like 3
blades,
and it's done. So what they do in the movie is going to
So the movie So, it's not like a stalk and slash in the vein of Halloween.
No.
Because Halloween is a character in the background of scenes, and you have characters having character moments in different locations, and then Michael Myers comes in and kills people. This is literally just kind of like a continued chase scene with a few intercuts of other sequences or other characters who then show up. There's not much plot to be spoken of.
Nope.
And the main thing that the movie does
It's just gore.
Is there's a lot of gore. There's a lot of kills that defy science. Like people use implements in ways that in real life it wouldn't work. You would just get stuck at a certain point and it wouldn't continue cutting. The person would probably die and be in excruciating pain.
It'd be excruciating.
But
death,
in real life, you would not be able to do some of these things.
Yeah.
And two characters do the thing of. This person's trying to kill me, so I'll hit him in the head with a beam of wood. I'm going to run into the next room and sit in front of the doorway, waiting for them to come and attack me from behind. Like, the characters make decisions like that throughout.
Except when it's the other way around, the killer obviously finishes the job. So I just get really tired of these hacky movies, kind of like similar to Chrome Skull or whatever it was.
Laid to Rest,
where it's like I put in the same exact category as that, where this is those movie that's a very mean-spirited movie.
Yeah, it's definitely mean-spirited.
I don't care for it. It's again a movie where most of the violence occurs to women.
Well, and the only
and I don't really know what it is. These people, I know like that's kind of a trope in horror, but again, it's like it's just so overplayed and overdone at this point. It's like if you don't bring anything fresh, which this one didn't. It didn't bring anything fresh.
It was a throwback to. So a lot of people said, not really a throwback so much to like the 1980s slasher boom, but more of to like some of the 70s like giallo-esque type American type stalk and slash movies. I forget which ones people set reference as like starting points, but pretty much there's little to no story. The only plot twist or story beats come with like a reveal that when you realize it very early on that this is what the reveal is going to be. And then it's just mostly, do you want to see this kind of creepy looking clown character stalk people and kill them in very brutal ways with little to no story connectivity? Not that much tension because the characters do really dumb stuff. They get away from the killer and then sit in front of an open doorway. And, so my thoughts, if there's somebody that's in real life, people do this. Well, actually don't. This is not legal advice because you'll go to prison. But if someone is like stalking you and killing your friends with a knife, and you have, say, a beam of wood or a pipe or something, you hit them in the head and knock them down. Don't run away and wait for them just to get back up and come after you. Beat their head until it is a bloody mess.
Well, remember Zombieland double tap? Just do the double tap, finish it, you're done. Movie's over, but I just get so aggravated. It's like at this point, this.
But like I
movie
said,
is
legally speaking, don't take that advice because that might be murder. I don't know.
And two, you have all these movies set in America, and we're all like gun fanatics. So
and
it's like nobody has a damn gun in any of these movies.
To be fair, if there are two girls that are out for Halloween party at nighttime in their costumes, it's not super likely they'll be packing.
You've been in America.
You've
been in America. There's probably some. They got guns everywhere.
Because there is a thing on Instagram now of a bunch of like girls who do like seductive, attractive poses with like
guns.
Scantily clad. That have like guns like in their cleavage or like in their underwear or something. But
like in some homes you have to move the guns to get to the gun to move the other gun to get the TV remote. So it's
it's pretty much so if you want a mean-spirited, straightforward movie with little to no plot that has a little bit of like a throwback to the 70s, 80s, but doesn't have like fake film grain and film scratches and stuff all over it. They just kind of shot it with like color grading that's kind of throwback. Shot in modern era because they have cell phones and stuff like that. In modern cars.
Which they don't really, I can't really remember exactly, but I feel like they didn't use the cell phones in the way that would have made sense, is like calling the cops or like just doing anything. If they did, I can't remember, but it's like, there's just so much in this movie I watch, and it's like, I get tired of watching movies that are just all bad decisions.
So you have throwback stuff, like...
I know some of it maybe is budgetary, or maybe the level of actors you have can't convey what you're wanting to do.
Two questions. How was the acting? Anything?
Yeah, no, not
the
good.
acting was, kind of par for the course in an independent, low-budget film. Okay. Nothing stood out to me as especially egregious, but nothing really stood out to me as transcendent.
Yeah. And two, that all depends on the script as far as
now the Art the Clown character was very creepy, and I think that character could be utilized in a fuller story. That is, so if there was a horror anthology, like a bigger budget anthology, like Tales of Halloween or something, the Art the Clown character could be used very well in a 10-minute segment in that. because the character was creepy.
I guess you didn't see the other anthology they did, right?
No,
It
because
says it's an hour and 23 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's on the cover of it, so I'm guessing he maybe has a segment.
it's a different actor that portrayed it in that versus this, because this actor apparently had like more background and more experience.
Yeah, I guess what I watched, because I guess there's a part that was from that, because I watched, like, after I watched that movie,
Terrifier.
I ended up watching I guess there's a short, or maybe it's this segment.
I think the short of Art the Clown got put into that anthology.
Okay, because I watched that, and again, it's just the bullshit. I don't know. That's what I was saying.
So for people who are into horror films because they like kills and gore, how are there any inventive kills? Is that any standout?
There's
scenes?
not really.
Yeah, well, so here's
I
how it's-
would say that it's not really inventive as much as there's just a lot of gore. So if you want gore, this does deliver on it, because there is a lot of it in there. But that's really all this brings. If you're looking for anything else, if you want a good, there are some good kill scenes, but again, like that's all it's got, and they're just kind of defy physics. So if you like physics defying death scenes, this is your
But
movie.
you want? I have seen on like different Facebook groups, some of the horror groups that I'm in, or on some of the reviews and stuff. There are a lot of fans that have really dug this movie because what it delivers. So whenever people talk about horror today is terrible and it doesn't do what it used to, and it's PG-13 is terrible, and Scream and all these movies ruined horror because they made it funny and stuff. So a lot of people who hate modern horror, they hate Stranger Things, they hate all these, pop properties and things like that, and they hate anything that's not just hardcore. This is probably going to please those fans.
Yeah.
If you want the mean-spirited, vicious kills with very little story, characters you don't really care to side with, because a lot of times in horror, there's like the movies that effectively make you get on the side of your protagonist, and you want to see them survive and move on and live. And then you get fully behind them. And those movies can oftentimes, make them very tense situations. You care about the character's survival. There's also the movies where you just have the killer character that is fun, and the characters are all so thin you don't really care about them. And then you just have fun watching the inventive ways you get to see annoying teenagers die.
And sometimes, though, you get the movie where there is somebody who is a bad person, but for some reason, the way they frame it, you still want to see them survive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like somebody brought it. I was reading something about Predators, where those are all like prisoners. In any other movie, they would be terrible. But even still, sometimes they will have, you will have a film where somebody has done something bad in the movie, but they get in a situation and
You root for
some
them.
odd reason, you're rooting for them. Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Just like kind of Devil's Rejects.
Yeah,
you know?
I was just about to say,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
even with the sheriff and stuff, like,
Yeah.
you have both sides.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have the sheriff and you have the
Devil's
killers.
Rejects never won me over to the side of the Rejects.
No, but I'm saying, I could see.
I'm saying I was on the side of them,
Yeah.
but I wanted them to escape. You know what I mean?
well,
For some reason, I didn't want them to
but
get gunned down
also,
at the end.
But you could also go with the sheriff or them. But
Yeah.
either way, that's the
And
one.
they're
good thing
both
the movie
bad,
did.
though.
Yeah, they're both bad.
Yeah, so the Terrifier, I think for the standard genre, the standard horror fan who likes your more highbrow horror, and things like that, this movie's not really for you or for a general audience, I think. Because I explained the plot of this to Julie, and she did not want to watch it at all. But I think people who thought that the Laid to Rest movies and stuff like that are good throwbacks, and they want their horror vicious and not a lot of plot. They don't want any characterization that makes them like side with the protagonist, and they don't want any humor, and they don't want any lightness or anything like
It
that.
doesn't have any humor. Anything.
So I think this satisfies the fans who think all modern horror is terrible, PG-13 is terrible, anything like that is terrible. Stranger Things is stupid. The new Halloween looks stupid. Like all these things where they don't like anything that's kind of the modern evolution of horror, and they just want stuff to be like it was back then, just straightforward, brutal, gruesome. Then they could enjoy this movie, Terrifier. But a lot of the other, I think, kind of not fans of that type of part of the genre, just general fans who, like I said, more highbrow stuff. So like we did The Changeling and stuff like. So if you're into those types of movies, I know that you're going to find a ton to watch in Terrifier. But it's got a lot of gore in it, and for its budget, it looks pretty good. I mean, some of it's obviously pretty fake, but it's not something that I would really recommend to the types
anybody.
of. It's not the type of thing that I would want to make. and I get that there's parts of people who enjoy this part of the subgenre, but the character itself I could see being utilized in something I would find enjoyable.
I was scanning through some of the Amazon reviews, and some people, even if they didn't like it, they were like, hey, the clown's pretty good, you know?
Yeah, the clown is creepy.
So some of the reviews, 6 out of 10, better than expected. 4 out of 10, like watching hide and seek for 90 minutes, tedious and a bit dull. 9 out of 10 has its flaws, but still one of the creepiest clown killer movies out there. Then 4 out of 10, 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10, total crap. 2 out of 10, creepy killer, that's it. Then 9 out of 10, amazing gore sequences. 1 out of 10, cookie cutter. It's going from 1 to 2 to like 7 to 9. So it does really seem like it's
so basically what
people are looking for.
What I would say is the way you could probably categorize those reviews. So if somebody was a huge fan of the 2017 It and it was one of their favorite movies of the year, they probably give the movie a 1 out of 10. If somebody hated the new It and said this is everything that's wrong with modern horror, they probably give it a 9 or 10 out of 10, or like a 7 or above out of 10.
Yeah.
So that's probably the way you break it down. If somebody really hates modern horror and anything that has any lightness or levity or humor to it, and things where the kills happen off screen or there's any CGI or stuff like that, they probably, if they hate those things, this movie probably gives you what you want. But if you hate just straightforward gore with the little story, then you probably don't get as much of what
Don't get me wrong. I love like schlocky gore, like especially some of
you
the
just want some personality to it.
Yeah, like
basically, probably.
when I go back, I'm gonna go to like Zombie, the 70s Italian zombie movies, like where the girl gets a piece of splinter shoved through her. Like I love stuff like that, but it's schlocky, it's fun. You got a shark fighting a zombie in the water.
Well, and
there's like Jace. You go look at some of the Friday 13th. You kill a guy in a wheelchair and you got a blade in his head and he's rolling down the stairs.
Well, I think
like that stuff is ridiculous, over the top, and still slightly vicious, but it's still kind of fun.
Well, I think
this wasn't any of that.
So the original Hatchet movie, like
Hatchet's vicious, but it's fun.
Well, I was gonna say with the original Hatchet movie had like these over the top vicious kills.
Yeah, but
and
when we
they
get
had
her
the
head
killer.
ripped in half.
Yeah, but it was also over the top because Anna Green has said it was more of a comedy.
Yeah, it came off as kind of a comedy.
So that makes it to me a little bit more watchable.
Didn't he like also use a lawnmower and cut somebody up with it too? And
I think so.
Or you cut a girl's face off with a lawnmower.
Have you seen Volumes of Blood horror stories?
No.
Somebody uses a lawnmower in that.
Yeah.
And Dead or Alive.
Yeah, Dead or that's what I always think of. Not the fighting video game, but the movie.
But yeah, so Terrifier. I mean, for the budget level and stuff they had, it looks really good. I'm not sure what they shot it on.
Like, I don't like crapping on lower budget stuff that people.
Well, especially stuff.
But when I see it and it's bad, I'm not going to I think it was bad.
If because filmmakers at this level are people we might interact with at some point. And it's just one of those things where the movie they made was not for us.
It was not for me. No,
it was not for me, not for you.
Now
I see the market that's there for it, and the clown was well done. Like I said, I think that clown. Art the Clown used in like a 10-minute anthology segment of something could be a great segment. That'd be like one of the highlights. But I think as a movie, unless you're going to give a little bit more story or structure to it, just a stalk and slash hide and seek, I'm not sure. To me, that sustains enough to want to see future sequels. Now, like the thing I always like is mashups of stuff. So have like a group of people that are like, I don't know, Navy SEALs back from deployment or some garbage like that, whose Art the Clown goes after, and then you have like a cool kind of cat and mouse game that goes back and forth both directions, then I'm interested.
Which is Death Proof and why I love it.
Yeah, or something like that. But then, like, just having kind of straightforward girls running around in like scantily clad costumes and the killer.
It just played out.
It feels like not for me. I get that there's an audience for it, and that's probably people giving it the 8 or 9s out of 10s. Is the people who just really don't like the modern state of what they consider to be watered down horror. But just to me, as a fan, I want a little bit more story there and a little bit more structure and something to care about.
And even though we may interact with some of these people, like we try to give, we do give our honest opinions, but we're just like respectful about it. Derek doesn't care about me in any circle, so he doesn't care. But I'm just saying, but either way, like, that's why I never feel bad about giving my honest opinion, because I'm like, I'm just saying how it is. I'm not trying to dump on anybody personally or anything. I'm talking about the product. You know what I mean? Yeah, and there's a lot of factors in that versus budget, time restraints, changes on set, people may be dropping out. You know what I mean? Like, it's never about attacking the person. Although sometimes some people on this podcast attack Eli Roth.
Yeah, but there's a difference between attacking
but also
him.
he's successful.
He makes
just
a lot of money. He deserves it. I don't want to go after the director.
It's kind of fun sometimes.
If I
He's made good movies. Like, he can be a little bit of a punching bag as a joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
He makes a lot more money than that.
like I said,
He-
that's
he
on
deserves it.
Netflix. So if based on our description, if it sounds like something you want to check out, it's on there. Or you can purchase. I think Dread Central Presents was who put out the disc release.
So good for them, getting Dread Central to put that out, and then being on Netflix, like they got back a little bit of money.
Yeah,
I'm not saying a lot, but
Yeah, like, you don't, like I said, like, you're glad they can get stuff out, but again, like you almost wish is like you'd put out something.
and,
Well,
and maybe this will be a springboard.
Well, and the director of the movie in different interviews had said that he looked forward to making future movies with Art the Clown. So I think the character has potential. I just personally would rather see it in a story that has a little bit more at stake and a little bit more going
Well,
on.
give it an actual story.
You guys
Yeah.
made me, we were talking about bringing up It. Like, so this is like the first, because it came out when my daughter was born, on the weekend my
Yeah.
daughter was born, and I was thinking, oh, wait, it's been a year since that came out. Like, this is the first new Halloween season. And I've been thinking about that movie a little bit occasionally over the past year, and it's like, actually, I think I'm going to watch it this October again.
Yeah.
Like, I may kind of put that in every year or so, or you know what I mean, at least every other year, because like
But It, yeah.
yeah, like I did like that movie. I've only seen it the one time, but I enjoyed it, and now I'm kind of like in the mood to watch that again.
Because
So
it was. I think. I have not rewatched
Yeah, I
it,
haven't
but I just
either.
think it was a very well done movie.
Well, just, I mean, obviously it made a ton of money and it connected with people, but it just tapped into the nostalgia for the 80s era that I think, like I said, like The Barn, a lot of these movies are a lot of independent and, movies have evoked that, or a lot of movies have referenced that. So like The Guest was a movie that heavily leaned into that type of aesthetic while being set in the present day. So there's a lot of independent movies that did that. And then I think Stranger Things is the one that really exploded it into pop culture. I mean, I'm sure there was other movies that did too, like Thor Ragnarok kind of had an 80s feel and stuff like that. But there's a lot of stuff that
and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy with all this stuff. So I think that the 80s nostalgia was a big part of a lot of projects. And then just, some of these things like Stranger Things just really established it in the, high school student, middle school student like fans and the parents and stuff. So it just really exploded that in general popularity. There's a lot of other things that contributed to
the
it as well.
nostalgia was there for people like 25 and 30 years old a little while back.
Yeah.
Now it has just been instilled in people that was like far removed from it.
Because
You know what I mean?
our
Like, it's
younger
all-
cousins that are 13 are really into Stranger Things.
Yeah.
So it just kind of tapped into a lot of audiences.
Well, too, though, it probably taps into that audience because that's their age.
Yeah, and then so you had the audiences, like the general populace was kind of primed for that and kind of in that mode already. And then it just came along and capitalized on it because it gave people a roller coaster movie they wanted. It had a bunch of scare moments throughout, whether they worked for you or not.
That's
were
what
in
I was
there.
like. I just like the sequences a lot in that film.
Because
We had a bunch of great set pieces.
Yeah,
Like,
you know,
it was
it
all
was like
set
a
pieces.
you
lot.
had Pennywise coming out so it had a lot of up and down. So it strategically placed set pieces throughout to keep things going on, and it just kind of tapped into that milieu and that that tone or feeling people liked. And there's been a lot of movies that try to do that recently. Some more successfully than others, but yeah, like I'll be interested to see how this ages, because the nice thing is you get the 80s nostalgia, but then you set the end of it in present day. So it's contemporary with the throwback era. Because I think if you set it in the 50s and 80s, then you're just retreading the exact same ground as the original. Might as well do something different a little bit. So yeah. So Sean, did you watch anything else bringing into Deliverance?
Yeah, I watched Upgrade. Leigh Whannell, right? Leigh Whannell.
Yeah, Lee Whannell.
Who wrote Insidious and
He wrote Saw too. He's one of the writers
Saw,
of Saw.
and he's in Insidious. And
then-
is he in Saw? I think
yes, he's in the first Saw as the Adam guy in the white T-shirt.
And then he directed Insidious 3 as well. Of course,
Yeah,
a number of
Chapter
other
3.
things. But so big fan of Insidious Chapter 3. I got this on Vudu because it was like a triple pack. Like you could pick 3 movies for $15. I was like, okay, I'll get. It's like basically like renting it for $5 because the other 2 movies I had seen and I had liked. So, I mean, I think most people know what the premise of this film is, but it is a light remake of RoboCop in some regards. Like he isn't a police officer, but something happens and then he gets an upgrade. So but now it is more about RoboCop was definitely about humanity and him regaining his humanity, but this is I guess more updated to the AI side of things, and how AI has I guess developed since something like RoboCop. But it is set like in the future, and honestly, one thing about the film, this is like weird criticism, but like it's set in the future. There's self-driving cars everywhere. and it's not like a huge budget film. This isn't Blade Runner 2049. So it is kind of weird. Sometimes you see these futuristic films that have a modest budget.
Yeah.
You know, and you can kind of, you feel the constraint by it.
This is a Blumhouse Tilt movie, so I'm not sure what the budget was.
Yeah.
They typically never make anything over like 10.
Yeah. And it feels like, you know, that feels about like a good ballpark. And not that it feels bad at all in that regards or like super stands out, but you could feel how money could have really helped flesh out this world
If it had
a little bit
like
more.
20 million or something.
Yeah, just something, or even just kind of maybe the way Looper was handled. You know, I don't know. Maybe it just had a little bit more budget than this, or it could have been twice as much or three times as much. But for me, that kind of, I was thinking about that more than I probably should have been, and maybe that was just me. So it did kind of stop it from hitting a certain level. But having said that, like the action's pretty cool. Different types of fight scenes that you've seen before. Not my favorite types of fight scenes, but at least it's something different. It's just not your traditional, straightforward fight scenes on kind of what you expect, but then not being as good as something like John Wick, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
or
just 'cause of the budget,
it's not good. Yeah.
The budget was estimated at 3 to 5 million.
Okay, that feels about right. So think about a 3 to 5 million futuristic film, like what that looks like. That's what this film looks like.
So
And
this is my car.
So
It's like cardboard
something
shape.
something I think they should do is you could do a mashup trailer of Upgrade in the Venom movie, because Logan Marshall Green often gets confused for Tom Hardy because they have a similar look.
yeah.
Now, I don't know if anybody else remembers this. Maybe a viewer or a listener will remember this. But when this movie came out, it was released right after Solo, or maybe around the same time. But one of the ads that I got targeted for on Instagram was the lead actor beating up people in the movie with Solo and Chewie's face superimposed over there. So it's like, didn't like Solo? Upgrade this weekend.
Yeah.
So that was like there. So it's like when that movie was taking shots at Solo,
Yeah.
like you knew it was bad because like it was just a direct shot.
Yeah, it was
just,
released on June 1st.
Yeah, it was just funny because I remember seeing that, and I wish I had saved it or even screenshot, but it was just like him beating people up, and then he had Han Solo's face on it, and he had Chewbacca.
Well, this is one too where I saw some tweets from Jason Blum where he had indicated they thought about having like sequels or more movies in that series. And he was saying like thoughts. I saw some tweets
Yeah.
on that not too long
Yeah,
ago.
So here's my point about all that futuristic stuff too. Like, it wasn't me just complaining like, hey, they didn't have enough money. When after watching the film and while watching it, I also felt they didn't need to set this in the future, really. You know what I mean? Like, it is not like anything crazy. Like, yeah, there's some self-driving cars. Well, we have that now. Like, there's a sequence that has to do with that story-wise. You know, the AI in the neck, like, whatever. We have Siri and, you know, Google Home and all that stuff. Alexa, like, it's not that much further from what we have today. So I felt like setting it in the future and the way it was actually kind of hurt it a bit for me. And again, this is all, I mean, it's the film as a whole, but you know, but I did like a lot of things about it. I wasn't maybe not as hot on it as some people, but I would turn it on again for sure. But yeah, it's worth a watch. Absolutely. But it's just hamstrung by its budget, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, otherwise it probably wouldn't have been made. So it's better to have been made at this budget than not made at all. But having said that, yeah, it would have been nice to have them to have a little bit more money just on the production side, because everything else is, or set design wise, everything else is top notch. And of course, you know, anybody's $5 million movie, typically, aside from comparing to something like Deacons, him shooting,
Yeah.
you know, on a baseline level, it's hard to tell a difference between those films and $100 million films unless you are specifically leaning towards some certain look or special effects or something like that. So yeah, it's all good. But
Well,
I don't.
what was better, that or Hardcore Henry? Because they're kind of similar in premise. Because Hardcore Henry,
I
can
mean,
always,
this actually has a story though.
which Hardcore Henry, as much as I liked it, literally did not have much of a story.
Yeah,
I mean, there was
Just kind
something
of,
there. Have you watched it?
No, I need to watch it.
I had more
It's on
fun. I had
Netflix.
more fun watching Hardcore Henry. This has some good character moments, but also, yeah,
Because
I feel like this should be the better movie. But I think I liked Hardcore
Because
Henry
if
more.
you had to sit there and tell somebody to watch something,
Yeah.
I think you watch Hardcore Henry, which I'm not saying is a great movie, but it's certainly an experience. And it counts.
So
for
here's the
something.
thing on Hardcore Henry. It is definitely it's almost like Terrifier, where it's gonna have people that like it a lot,
Yeah.
people that are like, no way. Upgrade is more in the middle, where you know, people I think on other either side can enjoy it quite a bit. Like it's an easy recommend. I think Hardcore Henry's maybe not an easy recommend for all audiences.
Yeah, it's
certain
not. As much
audiences,
as I liked it,
definitely
it's not.
Yeah, but Upgrade it's a good movie for sure. Like I'm glad I watched it.
You know, just take everything I say on movie reviews with a grain of salt, because I love a Nicolas Cage movie where, like, what's the one where he gets caught on fire? Wicker Man. Like, I love that movie, and it's awful.
How to Get
You
Burned.
need to see Vampires Kiss, man.
So, you know.
So that's like one of my favorites.
Yeah, I need to watch that. I love watching Nicolas Cage movies.
Yeah, so I guess now I can move into our review of Deliverance, the 1972 movie that has Burt Reynolds in it, who is longer with this, and it was like a big deal to me. That's why we decided to get to this movie sooner than later. And it's one too where I guess we'll do full spoilers throughout.
Yeah,
because
I don't think anybody has heard about this movie. They don't know.
So
about it.
Even if you have never seen Deliverance, you are aware of the key pop culture elements from it. Like,
And honestly, that was me.
I'm going to make you squeal like a pig.
Of it.
Yeah.
Boy, you got a pretty mouth.
Yeah.
And da 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 da. Like
The battling banjos,
Like the dueling
yeah.
banjos. So,
Sorry.
so
Battling
everybody battling banjos. It's a video.
Yeah, the fight scene at the end with
It's
the
like,
band.
That's what this movie should have
you know, like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, like a banjo, and they just hit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Deliverance is the movie that everyone I'm sure has heard of.
If you live in the South and you've driven anywhere in the country, you've hit a road where you immediately hear the dueling banjo songs, and you
that's
back
a
out
comment
and go,
everybody makes. They're like, "Oh, wait till we hear those banjos."
Yeah, and then
know?
you just like back out.
Everybody makes those comments.
Because this is a
consistently.
long time ago. We were my family was looking at lake property, and we were all, and then we drove down this road and like, yep, we hear the banjos. Time to turn around.
Yeah,
you know,
because it was getting like narrower and narrower and kind of sketchy. But yeah, so
I always wonder if that's a joke that northern people make too. You know,
But do they go to those areas where they can make that joke? Like,
because I'm sure that like you go
because-
in somewhere in places like New Jersey, there's like, ugh, you know, you
yeah, probably.
I'm not just picking on New Jersey,
But
I just-
specifically, even just places around us,
yeah.
it straight up looks like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
there's-
this is it. Like I've worked on several news stories.
Oh, yeah.
Where we'll
you've
go
been to
like, you know, an
Eastern
hour and a
Kentucky
half out, and we'll just have to go down this dirt road, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh god, we're in the middle of like no cell phone signal, nothing. We could be murdered right now. You know,
Yeah.
especially sometimes people in isolated areas like that don't take kindly to news folk because they think, you know, they just think, oh yeah, we're just there to start trouble.
Yeah, or even we live in, you know, Louisville, also Jefferson County, and like I work on buses, and we have to go do service runs sometimes. You know, go out and outlying in the county where people think they live in the country, and I'm just trying to do my job, and they don't like it either. And it's like, oh, like I'm just trying to get this out of your yard. Let me get, and yeah, but I just love that, you know, I think everybody's had that experience almost where you go somewhere like, oh, the banjo's
For
playing.
sure.
Yeah.
So director John Borman actually, I don't.
I thought you were going to say John Woo, and I was like, you know,
No.
this movie would be entirely different if it's directed by John Woo.
John Borman. I just looked up a little bit about him because I hadn't seen any of his films, I don't believe, but and this kind of relates to the film. He started out as a journalist, and then I think he went into making TV documentaries and became a head of some like BBC Bristol-based documentary unit.
Yeah.
And then he got recruited to make a documentary film about Dave Clark 5, which was like, I think it was called Catch Us If You Can, which was made because of the success of A Hard Day's Night. And so after that, it kind of springboarded him into Hollywood. But the reason I bring that up is because some of this is shot and feels like a documentary as far as, you know, not trying to be super, I don't know. It's beautifully composed, but it doesn't, I don't know. It feels like it is intentionally shot too. It's not shot in a gritty style, like say The Hills Have Eyes or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's something like, especially the rafting stuff. Like it feels like you are watching a documentary of people rafting. So it makes it feel authentic in a different type of way.
Well, apparently they had to desaturate some of the footage because the river looked too nice and beautiful. on
Really?
film.
Wow. Yeah.
I think something that works on this movie too. You know, I know we haven't really given a description, but the general description is, you know,
Well, so four Atlanta men decide to canoe down a river in the remote northern Georgia wilderness, expecting to have fun and witness the area's unspoiled nature before the fictional Cohulawasi River Valley is flooded by the construction of a dam. And this is from Wikipedia. So the characters Lewis and Ed are experienced outdoorsmen And then the characters Bobby and Drew are novices, just kind of off. Insurance salesman is like Ed or whatever. So, Bobby is the insurance salesman, and I forget what Drew does, but they are, and then Bobby is condescending to the locals and stuff like that. So it's pretty much just two guys that have experience like fishing and hunting or doing stuff outdoors or more experience. Lewis is the most experienced. He's kind of the rugged outdoorsman, and it's just taking like the city boys out to the wilderness to get like a guy's retreat in or something. And then of course it doesn't go well because it's, otherwise there's no movie. But let's see, I think it was also mostly shot in Georgia, and then there was like some other stuff they shot like in North Carolina, which
Chattanooga maybe.
It was the Chattooga River, I think. That was where they shot a lot of the footage.
I think I just glossed that over, and I was, because Smoky Mountains are not far from us, so
because they shot it in the Tallua Gorge and on the Chattooga River. It divides the northeast corner of Georgia from the northwestern corner of South Carolina. So they shot some other stuff in South Carolina.
Was the Descent shot around there?
It may have been.
Because this kind of made me feel like obviously,
because watching this, it was kind of like, this is like the straightforward, realistic
male
guy version.
Yeah. And
The Descent is kind of the female version with more of a genre bend to it.
We ever covered The Descent?
Yeah, we did it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we did it a while back. So, so the movie, you have those characters, like I said, full spoilers throughout, because the movie kind of all hinges on one scene. And so you have the guys are on their trip, and they interact with the locals, and kind of condescending to them. Because Lewis is just more kind of cocky and straightforward and treats everybody about the same.
Reynolds, right?
Burt Reynolds' character. And then Ed is the John Voight character. Bobby's the one who's kind of like the bigger guy.
Which one's in all the Burt Reynolds movies? There's one guy that's like in The Longest Yard, and he's the guy that gets raped in the movie. I can't think of his name.
Ned Beatty.
Yeah, because he's in a bunch of
who he calls Chubby, I think.
Yeah, so his character, so Ned Beatty's character, Bobby, he's the one who's a little bit more condescending to the locals, and they pay the guys to drive their cars down, or the Jeep and the car down to the other end of the river so they can get in their, once they get to the end of the river, pack their canoes up and leave. So they're on their trip while the one boat with Ed and Drew, or the canoe, they get off and go out in the woods, and then they run across a couple of locals who have a shotgun.
It was Ed and Bobby.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Ed and Bobby. They go out in the woods, and then the locals come across and start, harassing them, and then they tie Ed to the tree with his belt, and then Bobby gets, has to strip down naked, and he gets sexually assaulted. And then that's when he said, "I'll make you squeal like a pig," and all that goes on. And then you have the part where they're, preparing Ed, because like, boy, you got a pretty mouth. And that's when the other canoe with
Lewis and
Drew has come up, and they see what's going on, and Lewis has his bow drawn in the distance, and when there's, when the two rednecks are handing off the shotgun between them, he kills the guy that was the rapist. They get the shotgun, the other guy runs off into the woods. So that's kind of the turning point of the movie, because the movie up to that point, is just kind of like camaraderie, and it could even mostly be a comedy at points if they're going to take it far enough, make the characters like the city boys have trouble with like
what's the movie Without a Paddle or whatever?
Yeah.
It could
Which Burt Reynolds is in that.
Yeah, he could be in that, but you could almost have elements of that up until this point.
But then
it
at
takes
this
a hard
point,
turn.
then you take the point of, because I know there's like a lot of controversy, because in 1972, having, first off, I wouldn't call it a sex scene, but a scene that involves a sexual act between a man and a man on screen was not that common. And to have it be a rape, which is sad to say, the state of general audiences in 1972, it's probably more accepting of there to be a male on male rape scene than a consensual male on male, just normal, sex scene, probably, I would think, in mainstream cinema. But taking all that aside, it's just like that for that time was a shocking moment. And, for a lot of people
it's
today,
still kind of shocking.
It's still shocking because you think about that, still like, for anybody having that agency taken away and being violated like that, male or female, that's just a terrible thing to think about. Granted, the threat of that against women is used in movies and pop culture way more than against men.
Yeah, this is a very different film from a lot of movies that are kind of take the survival aspect and the, being terrorized and all that. Like it's almost like it flips it on its head, but it was still like an earlier one of these movies.
Yeah.
So many now rely on, a straightforward villain and a straightforward revenge or victory on that villain.
Yeah.
And then normally a female getting assaulted or,
But the way I kind of like this one too is because like once they kill the guy, then they are worried about that. Which I think a lot of movies don't take that.
Yeah.
They kill these people.
I mean, this was based on a novel, so they thought about it more than just say, hey, what would be cool to do on screen?
They thought about it as from the criminality aspect. Like, okay, we murdered this guy. What do we do
He said,
now?
I was on jury duty once.
Yeah, because,
The one guy.
because like they're sitting there discussing what they should do, and then the character of Drew's like, well, we should take the body with us and turn it into the sheriff when we get to the river. And then like Lewis rightly says, like, well, he's probably got a relative on the police force.
Yeah,
we'll go
this
to
whole
prison.
town's related.
And then at the end, that when the police are there, somebody's brother was missing.
Yes,
So it's like actually they made the right call. But
so kind of backing up a little bit too, like this film obviously is a lot about masculinity, and it opens with just the voiceover, them talking about how the whole river is going to get flooded basically, and it's going to wipe out all that land, and that's what they're talking about, burying the guy there because it's going to be underwater anyway.
and they won't be able to find it.
So definitely Burt Reynolds' character, he is somebody who wants to. He's a survivalist on some regards, and even Bobby, once they go down the rapids, he's like, oh, we beat that river. He's like, you don't beat the river. You don't beat nature. Like you
survive it.
He understands it, but also too, he is, he seems like he's out to prove something as well as being respectful of it. But also he's the person that like, once he gets injured, he's out from like a leg wound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's not somebody who is some superhero. Warrior.
His character gets very humble. Not humble, but it's like
he does.
And two, it's more realistic because in a lot, if this was a slightly more action tilted movie, he would have just had like something tied around his leg and just been like hobbling around.
It's definitely
and
saying
stabbing.
something about his character and his role.
Because he's like the most masculine, capable member of the group. And then the river takes away his ability to be involved in pretty much at all with the rest of it. And which is a good twist. And it just says a lot about no matter how great you think you are, nature can beat you.
Yes.
And the circumstances can beat you.
Yeah, and it wasn't like he got dropped off a cliff or anything. Like he got a leg wound and he was out.
And that's why I love the movie No Country for Old Men so much, because it has a similar idea. It's like no matter how good you may be and how clever you may be, the world's a rough place.
Yes.
And it's going to win.
Yeah.
So I like,
it had a little bit of that in it.
not the nihilistic element, just like the realistic element of proving a point. And then you have Ed, who has to kind of be the one that saves the day.
That's John Voight, right?
John Voight's character.
Was that pre-LeBaron and the biting incident?
Oh, yes, this was way before Seinfeld.
Yeah, I know. I just want to bring that up.
Well, too, I think that was a
John
role.
Voight's
I think that for the role of Ed, that like Donald Sutherland was somebody that didn't approach for it. Like there was a number of big name actors at the time.
Yeah, Sam Peckinpah I think was maybe going to direct it, and Jack Nicholson and everything.
Yeah.
Another film that this reminded me of while I was watching it, it was Straw Dogs. Sam Peckinpah Straw Dogs. Have you all seen that?
Parts of it. I need to.
Yeah,
watch
it's like
that
an English
now.
set with Dustin Hoffman. It is very much in the same vein of being kind of isolated in the middle of nowhere and at odds with some locals who seem to kind of, I guess, understand that the law is in their own hands. You know what I mean? Because of their isolation, like they don't live by the normal law of the land.
But I think what makes this movie so effective, even today, is like one, having watched it, because I think we can all, like, I've watched it from start to finish at least once. Most of the time I caught it on something else.
That's what I saw, like little bitty chunks, but I never saw the end of it because I was like, I need to sit down and watch this, and I just never made a point until now.
Well, it's funny, when I first learned about this movie was, what was it, Kids in the Hall? And they had, which is a skit show that ran on like Comedy Central all the time, is Canadian.
Yeah.
And the only
Michael's
reason,
produced.
the first pop culture reference ever was they were talking about male rape scenes, and it was like a comedy bit, and they talked about this. But they used to be on AMC all the time, and they never showed that part. But now watching like HBO,
Or they would probably just trim it way down.
But anyway, kind of watching all the way through this time is like, yeah, I wasn't bored through it. You know, a lot of times you get me personally, like I drift a lot on movies. You know, I think it's really easy, especially when you're at home, to get on your phone or do whatever. But it is a really well done movie, and like, you know, Burt Reynolds is awesome. There's so much good in it. And I just did not get bored that much during it, which I think says something about a movie from 72.
Yeah.
Because this movie is 72, and then the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was what, 73?
Man.
Let's see,
But see,
74.
But to me,
So-
I find this to be scarier than like something like the Texas Chainsaw
Well, my point was
Massacre.
just like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Deliverance, I think, set the stage for all of these modern Wrong Turn, you know, all the kind of movies of that ilk of redneck family. Rednecks in the sticks take city people and do stuff.
Hills Have Eyes was 77.
Yeah, so Hills Have
after
Eyes.
that.
So Deliverance, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hills Have Eyes. Now, granted, out of all those movies,
This one could happen.
Deliverance is the one that
It probably has happened.
could happen,
Or probably
the most
has
likely.
happened.
Because, you know, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is quote unquote based on a true story, but it's based on Ed Gein, who didn't use a chainsaw or do any of that stuff.
And
but-
then there's still kind of some supernatural elements because you like the super old dad. Where this one, like, there's stuff like that's happened like this. I mean, I listen to a bunch of true crime stuff because there's stuff like this happens
well,
a
yeah,
lot.
people, you know, unfortunately, people do get sexually assaulted and murdered or whatever all the time, you know, in urban areas and, you know, out in rural areas. But just
I had to drive 2 hours one day to Lockport, Kentucky, which was, I mean, like, it's like you literally, if you're standing on the edge of the town, you can see the entire town. Like, they had a general store who the guy they said was quote unquote the mayor, and that's who we went to for information on what was going on. Like, he wasn't really the mayor, I don't think, but he just kind of ran the town almost. And we had to go there because they have locks there in the river because there was a foot found there. So that's why, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like it's saying, you know,
kind of like
a lot of stuff can get lost.
A variation on the beginning of was it Blue Velvet where they found the ear?
A foot was found there, and it was everybody's like, of course, the whole town was in uproar, and people were actually, it was around Halloween because we interviewed this guy who found it, and he was getting back with taking his kids trick or treating, so they had to send his kids inside who were like 5 and 6 because we had to talk to him about this foot he found on the banks of it's.
Well, I think something that makes this really effective too is like, you know, because the way that they play it is like the city folk, and if most people who are from the city can probably somewhat, because like where I work at, and I think where a lot of people work, you have your guys you have like, you kind of fall into that group where you have like outdoors people, and then you have people that aren't, and then so it's like you know people that fit each one of these characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's something else who makes us more like, okay, I could see this happening because I know people like this. I know people that aren't necessarily individually like it, but you know, like this person fits that.
You know,
this
some
person fits that.
archetypes.
Our friends of ours, like Nick Hayes and Brad Fye, all of them, they go canoeing, camping all the time. And Nick, I just saw on Instagram, he just sold his house. He said he sold all of his belongings and gave away almost all of his stuff. And I was like, I messaged him, I'm like, what are you doing? What's your plan? He's like, I'm going to Yosemite Park and doing the JMT trail. And then I don't know what. Like, literally, he's going to just get away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it made me think, like, what is it about? Like, civilization now is at a point, at least where middle class Americans, you know, like, there's not really much survival aside from working and eating and keeping, you know, paying your bills is the survival aspect that we have to deal with. But so many people, and I get the appeal, but want to thrust themselves in these situations where there is a chance at death. Like, they want to conquer it or survive it.
So
and it's just this weird internal instinct, I guess, to satiate. I don't know.
And it just, I don't know. This is what I think this movie will always stay relevant, even because this movie came out in 72, so it's over 40 years old at this point. Like, I think another 40 years from now, this movie, you can still watch it
this movie
and be just as relevant as it is when it was made.
The only thing, so if you take this movie and you said it today, the only things I think that would make it where you'd have to make some changes.
Technology.
I don't know. Well, so technology, it's a very hand wavy thing to do, but it's super easy when they show up and they have their cell phones, and then somebody like the local rednecks are like, good luck with that.
There's no way they would have a signal.
I got my Cricket phone.
Yeah.
It's got reception down here.
Well,
you got AT&T. You screw boy.
I mean,
because that's how it is.
But they could have.
AT&T
They
don't
could have.
reception
They
anywhere.
could have. Well, Cricket actually just. I think.
I don't know. This is what everybody
So
has in the country.
these small networks piggyback off of AT&T and Verizon. I think Cricket uses the Verizon network, so clounce. But the
well, you
yeah.
go in these little tiny towns. Out
you could
Cricket
easily
dealers.
have them have cell phones or whatever, and when they go into the last gas station or whatever, the attendant's like, "Well, good luck with your cell phones down here. We haven't had services, blah blah blah."
I got my world phone, and he pulls out the big huge.
But so there's
Another
that.
thing too, when you see people backpack now and stuff, they have like a whole like luggage case full of stuff on their back.
Yeah.
They literally have like a little pack. You know what I mean? Like
Well, what I would love now too is have like the vegan, like super like earthy people, and like, well, actually, and they just actually the country guys.
So
they
we
just
gotta
screw
eat,
it, I don't wanna
we
do
gotta
this
eat
anymore.
these men.
But the other so the cell phones, if you were to make it today, it'd be very easy to hand wave it off and say, well, down this area there's no reception.
Or they drop them in the river or something,
Or whatever.
a hawk comes by and flies it, takes it out of their hand. You can do whatever you wanted.
I made that comment because when John Voight is on the side of the mountain looking at his wife and kids, I said something to Nicole about that, and she said, "You want me looking at a picture of us?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would." And I was like, "She's like, no, you'd be checking Twitter." And I was like, "Actually, that's what I would do. I'd be on my phone on the side of the mountain and then drop my phone, just like, like, oh, damn it."
Or just do a Family Guy-esque scene where the hawk flies by and takes it.
Or you have the phone up taking like a selfie.
Yeah.
It's like about to murder some rednecks, and then you drop it. And you're like, no, not the selfie. That would have got so many likes on Instagram. But the other thing that I think that in today's world you wouldn't do is trust a random person to drive your car somewhere.
No, I think that's definitely a 70s thing.
I don't think you would trust someone to do that today.
Unless it was like a park ranger and it was a certified service, but you would not just go find some random.
Well,
But that being said, we do use Lyft and Uber where you call a service and a stranger
But at
drives you
least-
around.
At least with those, there's some type
Some
of
vetting.
proof that like I use this.
There's a
it's
credit
tracked.
card.
Or, I
to be
mean, the way he
accurate.
talked, he could have had friends that had done that before. Because
Yeah.
he said, I need somebody to drive. Like, he already knew that he was going to get somebody to drive that. It went there with that plan.
But I mean,
for me, it felt like almost a bygone era of kind of the
Trust.
country. Yeah, not saying America, but being in the country or in the mountains, because even though obviously there's still definitely mountain people that live in the mountains and stuff, and then
There are still mountains.
I was going to say mountain folk are isolated. That circle of people who even have a connection to that is still shrinking more and more. As that older generation dies.
But I feel like this is more of a southern thing, though.
Yes.
Like having been in the north very few times, people are not as friendly in the north.
No, I think a lot of people are still friendly.
I don't know. In my experiences, generally they are nowhere near as. Like, if you're being courteous and hold a door open, you're the asshole. And that's been my
Like
experience.
in New
being
York
the
and
North.
Chicago, everybody's been
But
fine.
fair, I went to New York, and
Yeah, I've not been to New York.
people, I was kind of surprised. Maybe I was just lucky, but I thought people were so nice. And I was talking to somebody at the post office. I'm like, yeah, people here are really nice. Like, I didn't based on like reputation, like, yeah, really nice.
Maybe it was just the state that I was in. I'm not going to pick out the state. That'd be the one thing I'm not going to pick on.
But yeah, like New York and Chicago and these other places I've been, like Michigan and stuff, everybody was super nice or just normal. I think just some people aren't as outgoing and as prying sometimes in different parts of the country, because you go somewhere in the South and you stop at a gas station and the conversation goes into more details.
So what's your social security number and your credit
It's just
card?
like, where are you going? I mean, but like, not to cast aspersions on anybody of any part of the United States or any other country, in case you're listening from anywhere, but the movie feels like a snapshot of that time in terms of the trust for just a random stranger taking $30 and driving your car somewhere, and you could trust they would do it.
Well, it's like this movie. It's just kind of
even
like
when they're being kind of like dicks to them, they still do it.
Yeah.
Because like Lewis is driving and he gets lost and goes down the wrong road and stuff.
Yeah, actually, the one scene we haven't talked about is probably the most iconic scene from the movie. Is
the kid with the banjo,
as
they go under in the canoe.
Yeah, well, no, not just that, but when they do the dueling banjos.
yeah, it's a great
like,
scene.
That is one of those things that I think will always be relevant in pop culture, regardless of the point, just because that is such. It's funny how that became such an iconic moment.
Actually, so my wife didn't watch it with me. We were finishing.
Because if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen that.
Yeah, we were finishing. I was finishing up, and she came down and watched like the last 15, 20 minutes. And I was like, you got to watch the banjo scene. You know, I backed it up. And I was like, we got to watch this scene again. Like, I just want to watch it again.
And then the gas station guy starts dancing.
But it's like that's
that guy reminded
like,
me of like my great grandpa.
Like regardless of how dickish they had been, that's like the one scene where they kind of all connect.
Yeah,
and it's
like
like
over music and stuff.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like okay, and that's kind of like that false sense of like everything's gonna be good.
Yeah,
and then after that, because like later on they seem when they go under that, but then it feels a little different.
And, and two. Something else is like the banjo is like one of the hardest instruments to play, I think. And the kid was playing a banjo, he was playing guitar, and the kid still beat him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, well, I think too that just kind of shows like the false sense of superiority that people can feel over others because I'm from the city and all this stuff, and this kid bests him. And I mean,
that kid doesn't even have YouTube to look up tutorials like he did.
And I'm sure that because even back when I was in middle school or whatever and started playing guitar, you could go online and look up the tablature to any song you wanted, which just shows you like the finger positions on the fret and all that stuff, which makes it way easier than just reading the notes
or just learning how to do it by ear. Yeah,
so,
anybody can do that. Give them all the credit in the world.
So back to the. Let's just say sodomy. Like, that is another thing where they, this is obviously about masculinity where they had talked about women and stuff when they're like at the campfire, like the night before, and then I saw it pointed out like this is kind of turned on its head. You know what I mean? Like this is something that
they're the objects.
Yes. Yeah. Like it is turned on its head. And, and just like Burt Reynolds' character, like things get turned on him and it is all about these people being humbled, as you say, or you know what I mean? Just very, very much changed by this. And the thing that I love most about this, so after they're going down the rapids, and let's see here, I need to pull up the character names again.
It's Lewis, Ed, Bobby, and Drew.
So after Drew falls out of the boat, and they're not sure if he got hit or not.
They can't tell if he got shot or not because it's so loud.
And then Ed, John Voight's character, goes up to try to kill the guy, or stop him or whatever. Everything that plays out from there, because they're already very conflicted about what to do about the guy that they killed,
Yeah.
And then from there, instead of this being a typical, let's say, revenge film, as we were talking about, like before we started the podcast.
Yeah, I asked the question, was this a revenge film?
Typically a revenge film, somebody overcomes that person, gets revenge, and not necessarily rights that wrong, but they get what's coming to them. You know what I mean? And so for this, it's up until like the final moments of the film, very conflicted over, is this even the right person? And they never even know if
that was Drew, the same guy or not.
Yeah. Or if Drew was actually shot or if they just thought he was, you know what I mean? Like they never, they said, hey, we'll get a doctor to look at this. And then they never did because they never saw anything. And I think they were worried about the results maybe.
Yeah.
So they just kind of dropped him in the bottom of the river. So it is way more unsettling knowing like, hey, maybe I murdered an innocent man because of my paranoia.
Because the guy that was in the woods, so it also talks to the fact that they didn't really see the rednecks or the locals in the area as people that much because they didn't pay attention because the only thing you knew was the guy was missing teeth.
Yeah.
So the guy that he killed had teeth. He looked and it was like a denture piece put in. So it wasn't sure if it was the same person or if that person had shot the other guy.
And you don't know if the sheriff's brother-in-law or whatever was that man
rapist?
that was innocent. You know what I mean? You don't know
the
if he was
rapist,
just an
the guy they
innocent
killed
man.
on the cliff.
Yeah.
So there's all this kind of uncertainty with them, and
which I think is far more fascinating than the straightforward.
That's where this movie I think just works so good because it has like the element. I just like the legality element of it because like they think about that, and like I said, there's so many revenge movies, which is a genre that I love.
Yeah.
But that's never contemplated.
I think oftentimes those are so much on emotion.
Yeah.
And this is
not that it's not on emotion.
Yeah.
But these guys.
This is four people making a decision.
Yes.
Not one person saying, hey, this is on me.
So the only thing in the movie that is somewhat frustrating is when they take the shotgun from the rapist and they kill the one guy. They bury the rifle with him. So I get that they bury it because that would be evidence that could tie back to stuff happening. But at the same time, knowing there's still at least one other guy out there that could be getting friends, I would have kept that until later on in the trip. But I guess they didn't want to possibly have it on them in case they got cornered by the cops. And in the situation they were in, it wouldn't have helped that much.
Yeah.
And two, though, you don't know how much ammunition was in it, and if it only had
One shell.
Yeah, one shell in or 2 or 3, it's not going to do that good anyway. You know, so it's like...
yeah, but at the same time, though, it seems like I would have held on to it a little bit longer.
Yeah, and just having... Even if you just had it, they might not know what the situation as far as ammo count is anyway, so it just kind of a neutralizer.
And it seems, too, like letting the other guy escape into the woods...
an area he's familiar in that
maybe
you're not.
you would have wanted to shoot him immediately, but
again, it's like that.
But it's also like you're talking about real people in a situation. You're not. You're instinctively, after being in shock from what you just witnessed happened.
You killed a guy. Your friend got raped. There's a lot of stuff.
You're
going
not going to
on.
immediately think through all the implications of everything. So, but you said like there's the fascinating element to the movie of the characters are thinking ahead of what's going to happen when they get done with the trip.
Because that's never thought about. There's very few movies.
Because most movies, like I've always said, what I thought would be an interesting short film, because we did After the Slasher, which was the idea was the morning after a slasher film, the cops are going through the story of the survivor of a slasher film and saying, wait a minute. None of this makes sense because those movies always like the killer disappears at the end.
Yeah.
So when the cops go through the story, they're like, wait a minute. So someone got thrown through a window on the second floor of this house. How did that happen? 12 people got killed. I don't like if you break down those stories, they don't make a lot of sense. And the cops would probably not believe these stories, especially if the killer doesn't, they couldn't find a body of the killer.
Yeah, especially,
they're like, wait a minute. So you stabbed this masked man 12 times.
That's where this movie, I think, just from the true crime element of me and just knowing that's the fascinating part of it, is like just how that is.
So
approached.
they get the first body they bury just so that it won't be found.
Yeah. And
then their friend who dies on the water, they tie him down with rocks. So because like they said, like, was it a gunshot? Like, could have been a rock. Like, well, through an autopsy, somebody could figure it out. So we can't really take the risk of our story not matching. Which is, very sad because somebody, has like a wife and kids and somebody that was like their friend, or at least they knew to some degree, died. And they just have to leave him, in the river.
And they did that with their friend as well because, they basically said, oh, like he fell out or whatever, like.
That's what I'm saying. Like they couldn't determine if he had died from bashing his head on the rock or a gunshot.
They didn't even get to return the body to his family.
They just had to put him under the river because they didn't know. And if it is a gunshot, they would figure that out and be like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Your story doesn't make any sense. So they had to proactively just, do something that they probably wouldn't have wanted to. And then when they get to the, the end of the river, and too, like the Burt Reynolds character, Lewis, when they have like the crash in the rocks and he messes his leg up, I think I was reading that they had shot scenes. So the movie, they had most of the actors do a lot of their own stunt work, and there wasn't any insurance on the movie to cut cost. And Burt Reynolds was in the canoe. And then they had done a dummy for that scene where he gets flung out in the water. And then they just didn't think it looked real. So then Burt Reynolds, proactively was like, well, I'll do it. So they put him in the canoe and had him get flipped out in the water. And he broke his coccyx, which I actually injured mine. I don't know if I broke it, but I injured it on a houseboat trip because the slide was really slippery.
Is that your tailbone?
Right?
Yeah.
I broke my tailbone
Nicole
before.
has
It sucks.
broke hers.
And there's not a lot they do for it.
Yeah.
They say, oh, that sucks. But
remember they gave me the little pillow to sit on? I broke mine. Yeah.
Yeah, because I went down this houseboat, had a slide, and people have been going on it all day long, and like suntan lotion, all that stuff on. So when I went down the slide,
Pull the William.
no, it was slick enough. It was slick enough that I kind of bounced up and landed on the edge of it right before I then fell 12 feet into the water.
Yeah.
But so Burt Reynolds in that scene broke his coccyx, and then afterwards, when they watched the dailies, he's like, "So how did it look?" And then the director's like, "The same as the dummy." So,
Oh my God.
but so the movie, like John Voight actually climbed the cliff. So there's a certain element to it when there's real people in place doing this stuff. And
It's like Tom Cruise.
That's what I was thinking about. All the rapid stuff, like it's
real people.
It's fun to watch. It's like watching a nature documentary.
Yeah,
almost,
I mean, it's some beautiful
like just
scenery.
watching them just go down that. And he, John Borman, he was saying like, we could not have made this film today. You know what I mean?
And two, it's one of those things when you watch it, there's nothing in it that rings really fake because like the arrow effect looks fine.
Except for the compositing of day for night and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
really
yeah,
terrible.
I mean,
like half his face is gone through one part.
I mean,
that
yeah.
looks awful, but it's fine.
There are movies today though that do bad day for night. I mean, it's a lot easier with modern.
Have you seen? Did you see the one where like this half his face is gone because of the king or whatever?
Yeah.
Like it eats into his face. It looks pretty bad.
And what
but,
is it?
On one of the shots in this film, like So it's like kind of from this angle, William, right here, and this whole side of his face disappears. Like just this part though, because of like the unfine line of
Okay.
it's fine, but whatever.
Okay, so I didn't really catch that.
Yeah,
'cause
I was like, man, this looks really. They were just going for it. They saw Star Wars. That Star Wars is after that,
but well, I'm just saying, like a lot of the effect stuff. There's not anything that stands out.
all the practical
Well, because
stuff.
it's practical.
Yeah, I mean,
72.
so
there wasn't no CGI 72.
So the movie too, so like
CGI
all these
Reynolds
elements.
flying nowadays.
So this movie has all these elements of the kind of these character work and things that are more like general themes about man and nature and rural versus urban and all these undercurrents you can kind of draw out from the material.
Plus, it's pre-mustache Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, and
he's very muscular in this movie.
Yeah, and he's doing like the kind of like masculine man.
Yeah.
And you have all this stuff like that. You have the pop culture moments of the dueling banjos and the kids sitting on like the bridge looking down at them as they go under, because that's been parodied in different things or used.
Family Guy does it at Kermit the Frog a lot.
And then you have all these different elements of this movie that have ingrained in pop culture. And I don't really think it's horror so much as thriller. I don't really think.
No, I mean to me this would be definitely more of a genre film. I mean it's not. I mean it's not straight up horror in the same way that The Green Room is not straight horror. The Green Room is very much genre.
But
For me, this is more horror than a lot of stuff, though. I get
this is scary.
I get I get the differentiator, unlike some people. But as far as like horror films go, like I prefer like this is more affecting than. Every
me,
other slasher.
The idea of this being pretty plausible, even today, or parts of it being plausible, that is far more effective than a mass.
Well, for me, it's not even the plausibility. I mean, granted, it is the plausibility, but it is the lasting effect of. There's no closure in the film because there's no closure for the characters, and that it will haunt them for the rest of their lives. And
because
knowing that, and knowing how easy it would be to get in that situation for yourself, and then you have to live with that for the rest of your life.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be remembering this. I just watched it the other day, but I've watched a couple other things since. At the end of the movie, don't they show like a kind of a pan over of the lake? And then you kind of see like some bubbling or something.
See a hand come up.
That's a dream that John Boyd's character has.
Okay, so
he has a dream.
Okay, I couldn't remember if that was like what actually happened.
So
that was
the lifelong effect of that for them will be worrying that one of those bodies will wash up.
Yeah.
But then at that in that era was the DNA stuff.
No,
They could have been arrested.
Put it like this: the point that water flooded that and the damage that it would have done to the bodies, it would probably be very hard to say what
by the point that the bodies were to probably rise up, they would be so decayed,
especially
or deformed.
from them flooding out the town.
Yeah.
But so you have the element they get to, once they get back to civilization.
I think the existential dread that they would feel is something that
constantly
everybody
just as bad.
That to me, that's scarier.
Constantly worrying that that's going to resurface and ruin their life.
Because honestly, granted, he doesn't want to be taken away from his wife and kids, but even if that happened and they found out, he would at least have some closure. And for some weird reason, it seemed like he'd be able to sleep better at night. Then knowing like, okay, it's off my conscience. I'm clear. It's out there.
I guess the bad thing for them is they technically didn't do anything wrong. What I'm saying is like they were thrust into a situation where they had to make decisions.
all of their actions were. There was no ill intent.
Lewis, shot the guy with an arrow in the back, but they were armed and were sexually assaulting.
Yeah,
likely going to kill them.
That would stay. You could. But I'm saying is, but given that situation, like you said, with who's that guy?
Not even talking about legally, just morally.
Yeah.
You know, like they.
Yeah,
they were not trying to go out and kill somebody.
No.
So but so they get back to civilization. They have to kind of coordinate their stories, and they kind of align their stories before they get there. And they do have to make some modifications to the story. So you have them kind of just being there and the police questioning them and not really believing their story. And then they're dragging the river and they say, well, let's see what we find. Lewis is in the hospital and they said he could lose his leg. So they don't really give any closure on that either. You don't know if he
But he lives, so.
He lives. You don't know if he heals up to be fine or
if he loses
has
a leg,
complications.
chances are he won't be the same outdoorsman he was before.
Well,
you know
regardless
what I mean?
of what happens, he'll be different.
Yeah.
But he could be physically different as well as emotionally different, and that would drive even more of psychological change. But you have the element of like when they're in the hospital, and you just see he's been kind of faking like being unconscious because he kind of wakes up when he's talking to Ed, and then Ed tells him we need to change the story, and he kind of like acknowledges it. And he's like, I don't remember anything, which would be plausible, if there was like the accident that they're claiming happened, and then the cop, the sheriff, really doesn't believe them and just tells them at the end when they don't find any evidence to prove they did anything, tells them just to get out of the town and to don't come back. Which they obviously weren't going to anyway. Yeah. Because he had to have known that something didn't smell right. But if there's no proof, you can't hold people for suspicion. Yeah. Because you can only hold them for 48 hours or something. There's only so long you can hold people without charging them.
Or without evidence. Yeah, you only get that.
You can only hold them for so long without charging.
And the suspicion came from they had their story set that all this stuff had happened at a certain point of the river, but then they found the extra canoe upriver from that.
Yeah.
And they was like, how did the canoe go upriver?
Yeah.
And they didn't really have an explanation for it, but.
Yeah, but then at the same time, there's your story not matching, isn't proof of anything. You could say, well, I don't believe your story, but I can't find any proof that your story's not. So you have the element, and then just the dread all of them will have, knowing they could be caught, or, something could come up, but they all just stick their story, and, they were involved in the murder of a person. They lost a friend. Bobby was raped and then didn't want anyone to ever mention it again. So, he's going to have the long-lasting effects of that. So there's all these things happen that, the movie leaves on like this unsettling note with no closure.
Yeah.
And there's just all this stuff like that and just make the movie even, stand out even more.
It sticks with you for sure. Because even still, so I know we're recording this in a weird way, but saw The Predator and Mandy. And Mandy has a lot to think about, obviously. But this, I'm also like, now that I've finally sit down and watch this, I'm definitely going to dive into there's a lot of stuff that's been written about it over the past 40 years.
Well, too, so
and there's so many theories. It just, it just surprising to me the amount of, we always kind of critique these older movies because a lot of times they lack depth or they lack, they're not that interesting. But this movie doesn't have that problem.
Well, I think a lot of times what happens with these, with classic movies is they have a lot of elements that they kind of pioneered and kind of put out there.
But then somebody does it better.
And then movies later on take those elements and then thread in more things.
If it's a lesser film, sometimes that doesn't have anything but those hooks that are easily replicated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's a better film, it has something that is not going to be, that has its own identity. But sometimes there are certain techniques it may use that are pioneered. But if it's easily stolen, then the film, wasn't that great to begin with. Maybe just some of the things that accomplished.
So let's go into giving this movie a score out of 10. So let's start with Sean. What would you give the movie out of 10?
I'd say 10 out of 10.
I'm with Sean. 10 out of 10. This movie is something that I think you could think about endlessly. I think it's an incredibly fantastic film. I would have
watched it earlier.
And it's funny. Just lately, we've been on a streak of highly rated movies. And
we're going through a lot of movies that are more highly regarded.
And
because, honestly, when you do a podcast, sometimes we do dislike movies and communicate that. I prefer covering things that I really like.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes you just need to cover a wide breadth of things and not just cover only things you like. Now we do some of our own filmmaking. I always wonder, is there a line where it's not great to critique others' work as a filmmaker, blah blah blah. But
then you post it on Amazon, you get stuff. So it's screw it.
So
critique
it's just
everything.
Well, it's just I don't think there's
you can only get better.
And I think it's fine to talk about the art.
If
as long as you're not bashing.
If you're honest with your thoughts and opinions and provide backup for it and explain what you think.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody can really be upset. If you just lay out what you thought about something. So to me, I'd say it's definitely 9 out of 10. Definitely a classic, a movie that everybody should watch. It was funny reading the Amazon reviews for this because for movies like this where I already know what my thoughts on it are, I don't really care about extra. I just was interested. I was like, okay, let's go and look. And there's a lot of people that gave it, between a 7 and a 10 out of 10, talking about it's a classic and they love it and all those elements we talked about. And there's a lot of reviews that were 1 out of 10 is 4 dudes in a boat in a river and nothing happens and a dude gets raped. This is stupid. So there's some people that just boil it down to those elements. What were you wanting? Were you wanting The Hills Have Eyes, the remake or something? What were you wanting? Wrong Turn?
To me, this movie is just so much better than.
But I think what happens is a lot of times if people see the horror thriller label, then they go in wanting it to do certain things because in reality there's the sexual assault scene and the threat of sexual assault, and they kill that guy quickly in an instant with the bow.
Yeah,
and then beyond that, the other altercation, the other altercation on top of the cliff lasts maybe a minute. Once Ed actually gets up there and sees the guy. So in the movie, there's maybe less than 5 minutes of actual like action, or actually less than that. The actual action combined is probably under a minute of the scenes where there's actual like altercation, maybe 2 minutes. But a lot of it's just the fallout of that and those characters dealing with the situation. And people, I think, would probably they expected to have a lot more of cat and mouse, a lot more fighting or more typical revenge story type stuff. And this movie just wasn't that.
So much more interesting to rely on. Yeah,
this wasn't Kill Bill.
The effects of what they have done versus just having some more sequences of them running through the woods being chased.
Well,
because there's those films if you want to watch
the ramifications of what they would actually need to think about. So, like, to me, that elevates it, and it's just, I think, for some people, genre expectations, and two, you talk about sensibilities and what makes people excited, what doesn't, because some audiences who are younger audiences like certain elements of things that older audiences don't like, and vice versa. Yeah. Which, like the latest short film that we've shot, they'll be trying to get out soon. I try to target it a little bit more at the audience who watches a lot of horror content online, just by kind of getting a feel for what they like. But I think
I know American teenagers,
but it's just like a lot of movies. This, like, Deliverance is an adult movie.
Yeah.
This was not a movie that teenagers are going to the drive-in for. I mean, maybe they did, but this was a movie that was an adult-themed movie. And we don't, like, I think in this day and age, you get a lot more of that on video on demand and streaming services. And, a lot of that's more on TV series more so than movies.
Well, you get them, but it is maybe more...
It's fewer and far between.
More art house,
Well, it's art house, yeah. I mean, because... Like, it just seems like over time, more and more movies are going for, trying to make $200 million or whatever, trying to be huge blockbusters, or just trying to be low enough cost that they can do well with limited theatrical and video on demand and streaming. And it seems like that's kind of gone in those directions. So I want to see more stuff that's just adult-themed movies that aren't superheroes, aren't the world's at stake, just small character stakes.
This is very small stakes.
And like, so this is something that I, really enjoyed and recommend giving a rewatch if you haven't, because a lot of it stands up. Like I said, the only things that you could even really point at are like little minor technical things that were, like you said, like the
it doesn't bother me.
Stuff that I didn't even notice on watching this time.
But yeah, I was watching it on our TV pretty close, and but it's just like, whoa, that's woof.
but that stuff like that is nowhere near as annoying as rewatching Van Helsing, the Hugh Jackman movie from the early 2000s with early 2000s era CG.
No.
But so that'll wrap up our discussion of Deliverance, which as of this recording wasn't on streaming services anywhere free that we could find.
Nope.
But you can buy a DVD copy. You can rent it anywhere. I think it was only like $2 to rent. It wasn't.
I found it in a bin at Walmart a while back for like $5.
Yeah, so it's something you can procure pretty easily if you want. So I'd recommend giving that a watch.
I rented the HD version.
Yeah.
And it looked pretty good, but I really do feel like this film is due for restoration. It could look so much better.
We'll have to look and see if there's like a better transfer somewhere.
I wouldn't assume there would be, because I haven't seen anything. Like, I really hope somebody gets this and kind of rescans the negatives if they still have them.
Blu-ray, 4K.
So yeah, because it's worth it.
Yeah, but that'll wrap up our discussion of Deliverance. If you're listening to the podcast via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and leave a review. That helps other people find the podcast. You can find everything we're doing at houseofasor.com. You can find links there to all of our social media accounts on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and all those places. And we will have a new short film coming out soon, and another one that we'll be shooting in October. So keep an eye out for all that stuff. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, because I have posted some stories and stuff on there.
The Greens.
But yeah, and if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at the William Caps.
If you like talking horror movies or sports or dogs, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MetaWorld Eric, and cats and gerbils, so at Cat and Gerbil.
At Blevins Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House of VSR podcast. Thanks for listening.